Hello and welcome to Opening Bars. I've been a hardcore fan of Van Halen ever since my ears were first vaporized by their debut album. Years later, I heard Jump for the first time on their 1984 album, and I thought to myself, what? Van Halen is using synthesizers? I was horrified. But as it turned out, Jump became their first Billboard topping hit, and today is known as one of the most iconic opening synthesizer riffs of all time. Let's take a look at a harmonic reduction. You can see on the grand staff that we're using the treble and bass clefs and that there is no key signature. No sharps or flats typically means that we are either in C major or A minor. The time signature is 4/4. Let's take a look at the chords in the right hand first. Everything here is quite compact and all three triad positions are represented. Starting with the very first chord, we have a G, B, and D in their closest closed formation, one note per adjacent line. This is then G major in root position. In the second half of that opening measure, the G remains where it is on the bottom, and we move to C and E, which is a C major chord. The fifth of that chord, the G, on the bottom, so this is a second inversion ordering. In the second measure, we have two root position chords, the first beginning on an F and the second on a G, forming F major and G major triads respectively. In the third measure, we have two C major chords, the first in second inversion, followed by a first inversion ordering. In the final two measures, we have some interesting things to consider. Van Halen begins measure 4 on an F chord in second inversion, and then moves to C major in root position, and then settles in the last measure on G. But the third of that triad, the B natural, is missing, replaced instead with a C, which feels desperately like it wants to move to the B natural, but it does not. This C is called a suspension, and because it sits just above the third of the chord, it is labeled sus4. Of course, one of the striking things about this little fragment is the long sustained C in the left hand for 3.5 measures. This is called a variety of things in music theory, including pedal tone, pedal note, or organ point, and is a compositional technique most often occurring using either the tonic or dominant note of a scale. In this case, it's using the tonic. I'm using the term pedal point here and use the label PP when notating it. You can see that I've done a harmonic analysis based on what I perceive the chords to be, which is not inclusive of the pedal point. It's very simple, using the three strongest chords available in the major scale, the tonic 1, the dominant 5, and the subdominant 4. There is not much we need to examine until we get to the very interesting beat 3 of measure 4. Here we move away from the tonic pedal point to an F. This is odd because we have a C major chord right above it, and the F is a non-chord note in that triad. So what do? I suppose we could label it a 4 chord with an added ninth. But that seems weird, as we don't have a third in the chord, major or minor, and this straight-ahead rock tune doesn't suggest advanced chord constructions like we might typically see in jazz music, for instance. We could just call it 1 and label the F a non-harmonic bass note. That's what the NHB label is. But a 1 to 5 cadence doesn't really seem credible here either. So I feel comfortable saying that this is in fact a 4 chord leading to 5. Therefore, while the C in the right hand fits, it must mean that the G is an anticipation note, resolving to the same G in the following measure, and that the E is a passing tone, moving from the previous F through the E and resolving to D in the final measure. Sounds complicated, I know, but remember, harmonic analysis is supposed to help us understand not only the vertical nature of the chords themselves, but also the function of those chords within the structure and the function and purpose of the individual notes themselves. Let's take a look at the rhythm. You can see here that I've broken down the bass line into eighth notes, very much like Michael Anthony, Van Halen's bass player at the time, did in the verses of the original recording. You can see that we're in 4/4 time, and I've indicated numerical values of the quarter note pulses underneath the left hand. I've also used eighth note rests in the right hand notation so you can have a very clear view of where the triads are to be placed in relation to the bass line. One of the things that you should always watch out for when playing syncopated patterns is actually looking for the notes or chords that are played right on the beat. You can see here that I've included a tiny little flag above the chords that sound on the quarter note pulse, and there are in fact only 3 of them. The rest are all off the beat. You can see in the first measure that the first chord is played right on beat 2 and the second is off the beat, or as we would say, the and of 3. So when we're counting out loud, we say 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. In the next measure, we play right on beat 1, the and of 2, and the and of 3, and the and of 4. In the next measure, the first chord sounds right on beat 2, and then the and of 3, and the and of 4. In the final measure of these opening bars, the last 2 chords are played on the and of 1 and the and of 2. So let's go ahead and do that slowly now, playing eighth notes in the left hand and counting the eighths out loud as we go. As a side note regarding piano technique before we begin, if you're playing repeated notes in any given hand, use alternating fingers. So in this case, alternate between your third finger and your thumb to play those notes evenly and with a steady pulse. Okay, now let's go ahead and count this out in eighths and play the chords where they need to be played. Here we go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. There's really not much more to it than that. Now that you know all of the notes and the rhythms, you can concentrate on advancing your musicianship skills. One thing that you can do while practicing is to play the opening riff as it is on the album with a sustained pedal point, but all the while thinking and feeling the pulse in your head in a subdivided way, as if you were actually hearing Michael Anthony's bass playing at the same time. This will help you keep the syncopations in time. On one live recording I heard with Sammy Hagar singing this song, I noticed that it was played up a tone in D major. Every musician should practice transposing, so let's do that now. Here it is written out in D major with the chord symbols in the right hand identified to help you visualize the harmonic movement. I've also notated the chords that are held and tied over the bar line. Go ahead and try that now playing in the new key. Once you have this riff under your fingers in the new key, you can extend your skill by rearranging the chords in their various inversions while still keeping the basic rhythmic pattern. This will help you visualize and hear the full chords in your head without worrying about playing individual notes. This is a very helpful skill for pianists. So let's try that now, playing, let's say, the very first chord starting in second inversion instead, and let's see what we come up with. I hope you enjoyed your lesson today. Remember, don't just play notes. Make music. Until next time, thanks for listening.